Hey guys, I'm here with Prasheen.
Hey guys.
We went out for our third morning uh, from Satara Camp this morning, and we got back. We had a quick lunch, and now we've got about an hour and a half to kill before the afternoon drive. We are going on a drive with the rangers this afternoon for a sunset drive. So hopefully, we can get onto roads that are not normally open to the public, and have some sightings that we wouldn't normally be able to see. Um, so we've been in the Kruger now for 2.5 days, and we've been taking a lot of wildlife photos. So we quickly wanted to jump on and give you our top 10 tips on what to consider when you are doing wildlife photography. Okay, so tip number one of the top 10 tips is, with wildlife photography, you want to fill the frame as much as possible. So you'd see a lot of these wildlife photographers, when they're driving around, have these massive lenses. Um, and this is because they want to try and get as close to the action as possible. So those lenses are called telephoto lenses. And Prasheen and I are mostly bird photographers, so we try to shoot above 400 millimeters on the telephotos, to try and get as close as possible to the animals that we are trying to shoot. Generally speaking, I'd say the 100 to 400 mil would be a good wildlife lens to use to actually fill the frame, not only for birds, but with animals like zebras, elephants, and any wild cats and large cats that you may see while you're driving, because they generally are a little bit further away from you. So they may be big animals, but to fill the frame up with those animals, you still need a bit of a zoom lens. Um, Shooting with a wider angle is not completely wrong. I mean, you can still fill a frame of a landscape shot with a wider angle, um, but then you're telling a story with the picture that you are, and you giving more an environmental shot of the animal that you are trying to capture. So your subject matter will be surrounded by its environment, and you can tell a story that way as well. It's very effective to do that sometimes. You see a leopard in a large marula tree, for instance, and you want to try and capture not only the leopard on the branch, but the size of the tree and the scale of things. Or you see an elephant standing under a large sycamore fig, and those are huge trees, and it almost gives a sense of scale when you have the animal smaller in the frame. So it depends on the story you're trying to tell, but more often than not, you want to be filling the frame as much as possible with wildlife photography.
So tip number two is don't ever settle for the first shot. I think on this trip, a lot of times when we've seen, especially birds sitting on perches, um, we normally, what myself and Pranesh try to do is try to get a record shot, and then position the car either a few meters forward or backwards to get sort of a more clear background. Because in more instances than not, the first shot is not necessarily the best shot. I think, for example, this morning when we saw a southern carmine bee eater on a sort of dead perch, dead tree perch, um, it was cool to see it at first. It got a couple of shots, but what we noticed is that the perch was blocking the tail of the bee eater, and for me personally, the bee eater is characterized by the tail. And there were a couple of like brown twigs at the background as well. So what Pranesh did was we moved about a meter forward and got it from slightly from the back, arching over, and we were able to capture its colors, its head, its eye, and its entire tail together with a nice milky green background, which was something nice, and hopefully um, we'll see something a bit more of that.
Yeah, and it probably gives you a shot that you can print later on.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, then I think tip number three for wildlife photography, but also I think applies generally is, watch your crop. So you can apply the normal composition rule, so rule of thirds, or use your negative space. But with wildlife photography, you have to be careful with a few things when you're cropping. So a lot of times you'll be shooting animals that are walking in longer grass, and what you want to do is avoid cutting off their legs, because if they're in longer grass, you almost have to imagine where their legs would be, whether it be a zebra or a leopard or a elephant even. You don't want to cut off his legs. I think particularly bad is rhinos sometimes. If they're feeding in longer grass and you zoom in and forget that the rhino has to stand on legs, it looks like one of these Goodyear blimps just floating along in the grass. So give it space for the legs especially, and then if you've got a longer lens, you have to watch things like cropping on eyes and ears. So with the cheetah and leopard, you sometimes forget that their tail is almost a third the length of their body. So I've cut off leopard tails previously, and I still rue shots where I've cut the tip of a leopard tail off because I didn't account for its tail being so long. Um, and then I think with birds as well, just watch their wings. Don't clip their wings and their tail feathers. Sometimes the birds have long tail feathers that would stick out of a shot. So if you've got too much length, you have to be careful of where you're cropping. Do a head and shoulders, or do a body on the perch and cut the tail off, but be cognizant of that. I think the last thing with cropping specifically is if an animal is moving or looking in a certain direction, you have to give them the space almost to move into. So if let's say if a cat is moving from left to right in the frame, you want to have more space on the right hand side of the image so that the cat can almost move into that space. So you have to give them that space to move into. So watch that when you're cropping in and composing your shots as well.
Yeah, I think it's very easy to be distracted by something and just sort of taking a picture and not remembering all of this. I think it's easier to compose your shot, pre-focus, know where the animal is about to move, and then take your shot. Because it's very difficult to add space in sort of Photoshop and stuff
Photoshop.
afterwards.
Yeah. So and a lot of the cameras will allow it. Uh, I've been shooting, with the Canon cameras. You can pre-focus or you can lock focus, and then shift the camera and recompose, and then click the shutter button. So it's a half press on your shutter button, and then when you are ready to take the photo, you fully press it in. I think Canon still do that. Sony still do that. Um, Sony has autofocus tracking, so once you've locked onto a subject, you can move your camera around, and it will follow the subject, and you can then recompose and take the image to give the animal, the space it needs in the frame.
So tip number 4, I think, is just to know your gear, know the limitations, know what your gear is actually very good at. I think in my case, I know that the Canon R5 has a very good ISO performance, even though it has a very high megapixel count. So I know I can bump the ISO up and know that I can get very clean images. Whereas if I look back on when I use a 70 Mark II, the ISO performance is not very good on that camera. So I tend to shoot slower shutter speeds, and hopefully the subject will stay still, and I will still get full detail and full crispness in the image. I think as well, it doesn't only apply to the actual camera body itself. I think your lenses as well. Know what your lenses are capable of doing, whether the glass is good enough to shoot into bright light without flares, um, know when or when not to use a teleconverter, and I think also as well, personally, what I find very helpful is knowing where the buttons on my camera body is, so I can easily, without looking away from the actual viewfinder, adjust settings and then take the picture. Because normally, if you sort of pull back, adjust settings, your subject will have moved off, and you might have missed the shot already.
Okay, guys. Tip number 5, I think, is in nature, it's very difficult to get a static subject. So they're not going to pose for you, obviously, but they're always doing something. Whether it's birds or animals, they're always up to something. So what you want to do is try and capture the action. So, if a lion is walking down the road, you want to try and capture, that movement in the lion as it comes down the road. You almost want to capture the gracefulness that even the biggest male lions would walk down a road with. Um, if you tracking birds, you will find that they often preen themselves. So you want to catch them with their head in their feathers, trying to get their feathers as clean as possible. So I would say capture the action, and help use the action to help you tell your story almost.
Yeah, I think on that, I think anyone can capture a bird on a stick, but I think just imagining and for signs such as when the bird sort of slouches forwards, you know that it's about to take off, and then you can sort of, with reasonable probability, know that it's going to fly in the direction in which it slouches, and then you can prepare for the shot.
Yeah, so I think birds in flights becomes a more intermediate to pro level shooting, but as a beginner, you can almost start trying to learn the behavior of the animals and trying to predict where a bird would take off to, or where it would land even, and then try to capture the action as it does so.
Cool. So the next tip is preparing for the shot. So for me personally, I find preparation is key when it comes to at least bird photography, and what I've learned as well is sort of the big five photography as well. I think just preparing mentally for the shots that you're looking for. For example, I knew that I wanted bee eater shots when I came to the Kruger National Park. I wanted some roller shots as well. So I know kind of what lens to use when I do see one, and I know what backgrounds I want, and I know what settings to use when I actually see them. So I think that's very key, because any hesitance in those steps will mean that you might miss out on the shot, and you might never ever see that bird or animal again. So just preparing for that shot. I think another a great example of this is when you get to an elephant around an amarula tree. Even if you're like 100 meters out, you can start getting your lenses, your wide angle lenses, or any shot that you have in mind prepared, so that when you actually get to the spot to get the shot, you have the gear, you have the settings, and all you need to do is compose and push the trigger.
Yeah, I think with that example that Prasheen gave of an elephant, around the marula tree, he may reach up, so you may want to shoot portraits, so you must be prepared for that. Or he may suddenly shake the tree to get some fruit off the tree, so that would take almost a different set of settings than the first shot. And I think it also goes back to the second tip that Prasheen said. I mean, sometimes your first shot is just a record shot, and then you start making adjustments so that you can get the shots that you want to. So, guys, tip number 7, I think, is know your animals that you're going to look at, and what their behavior is going to be. I think generally you want to be out during the early hours of the morning and the late afternoon. So it's your golden hours that you want to be out, just as the sun is coming up, and then just before the sun sets again, and a little bit after sunset, because you get that
The blue hour.
where the light is pink or blue and very nice, but there's no shadows and stuff like that. You'll need some special settings to do that, but know that that's your best time to shoot, and that's the best time that animals will actually be out and about, and moving almost. And then you must almost know that, like, on um, you know sunny days or hot days like it is today, elephants will go down to the water holes to drink. You'll even get some big cats coming down. A lot of the grazers will come down, so you can almost sit on a water hole and get a lot of animals in one go almost. And then when it comes to birding, I think you must know that certain birds will nest in uh, holes in trees, for instance. So look out for birds going into trees or flying into trees, and then entering cracks in them, because they may well be nesting in there. They may be young in there. Similarly, I mean, with leopards, you must know, well, any big cat for that, for instance, but using leopards as an example, uh, know sort of the environment that they like. So, near riverbeds, a little bit of thicket, lots of boulders sometimes, and know that they may go on walks to mark their territory. So you could possibly follow them down the road for a good 10-15 minutes, like we did last night, as they are patrolling their territory. So yeah, it's good to know the animals and how they behave.
Yeah, so I think another sort of to follow on what Pranesh is saying there, I think especially on a hot day like today, you will tend to get much more animals at the waterhole. But for my style of photography, which is bird photography, the birds will probably be in the shade. It's too hot at this time of day. You might probably not see any birds for that instance. So there's actually no point in looking for the birds at this point in time. It's better to wake up early in the morning or late in the evenings when there is good light, when the atmosphere is a bit cool, so they would actually wake up. They have the energy to come out. They wouldn't be drained by the sun, and they tend to feed early in the morning and late evening as well. So that's something just to look out for. So, tip number 8 is editing. So, it's a bit of a topical topic, but I think the way I see it is that editing should be used to enhance the beauty of what you're seeing out in the wild. I think for many instances, people over edit, where they pull out colors or they change backgrounds, and it just looks unnatural. And that's not what the purpose of editing, at least from my perspective, is. The camera sensor can't capture as much information as the human eye. So the way I see editing is that it just brings out the natural luminescence of the animal that you're shooting, and it's similar to how you actually perceive it when you actually saw it live.
Yeah, I think to add to that, and Prasheen will know this, I tend to shoot um, my pictures for the way I edit. So, as much as Prasheen says, editing or over editing should be limited, I tend to shoot, underexposed, so that I can pull out, colors and the saturation of a specific subject matter from the shadows. I think that's how my camera sensor works, and I almost know that the camera sensor will work like that, and will deliberately underexpose and then in post correct. I think anyone looking at the back of my camera would actually be shocked at some of the images I do get, because they're like, but this is too
Too dark.
too dark. It's like a full stop underexposed or something like that. Prasheen may shoot in the opposite direction, because his camera may be different. So that's good to bear in mind. But where I do agree with Prasheen is, sometimes you'd get like possibly a stick or something that's naturally occurring, and people tend to then overly blur the background out
Yeah.
just to get a blurred background that they didn't get in the park that itself, and they put it in post, or something that feels unnatural. So you almost want to keep it as natural as possible and keep the editing to a minimum in that regard.
But I think that gets back to the point in that never settle for your first shot. There's always a better shot out there.
Yeah.
And I think no matter how sophisticated these editing software gets, it'll never be better than actually getting it straight out of camera.
Yeah. No, agreed. So, guys, tip number 9, I think, is one that may spark a little bit of debate, but I think for Prasheen and I, for sure, it's one that we stick to, and that's to keep it as ethical as possible. And when we say ethical, I mean the animals in these game parks, are living their lives as well. So if you do see, for instance, a herd of elephants walking down the road, don't cut off youngsters from the rest of the herd just to get a picture of an agitated youngster. Or if you see I don't know, a leopard in a tree, don't start clapping your hands to get its attention,
To wake
so
it
that
up,
it wakes up and then looks at you, so then you can get a shot of him giving you his full 100% attention. Try and keep it as natural as possible, again, just like the editing. And if the subject matter is under a bush, and it takes maybe 30 minutes for him to wake up, it may be worth waiting that 30 minutes. I've done it before. I've sat on lions for 3 hours. I've sat on cheetah for like 4.5 hours in 45-degree weather, just to try and wait for them to get moving again. Don't try to push the shot just to get the shot, I think.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I think I see a lot of people using bird calls to attract birds, but I think that's very unethical. I think for some birds, they might mistake it as a mating call, and like, you don't want to mess with what's happening in the natural environment. I think a good example of that is today, on our drive to the Satara rest stop. We encountered a family of southern yellow-billed hornbills, and I think we could have easily played the sound and they could have perched, but we decided to sit on them for about 15 minutes, let them hunt, let them do whatever they wanted to, and then they actually naturally came and perched in front of us, and they feel comfortable that way. I think we were able to sit on them for about 15 minutes because they perceived us as being safe, rather than being agitated by somebody trying to clap, or somebody trying to play a bird call, which is actually fake and might actually agitate them, and then you might actually lose the entire shot.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Tip number 10, I think, and probably the most important one, is never to stop enjoying what you're doing. You got into wildlife photography because you love nature, or you love taking pictures of the animals that you love in these wild game reserves. So don't forget why you got in. It's not about the shot at the end of the day. It's about enjoyment of getting the shot. So
yeah, I mean, being outdoors, being one with nature.
One with nature, yeah. So I mean, you're gonna miss the shots sometimes. Yesterday we were sitting on the leopard sighting, and my camera for some reason focused on the paw as it walked forward, so its eyes aren't sharp. So it's a missed shot. But when I get the next leopard opportunity, I'll know to change my settings so that I can get better. And you're going to miss sightings, by a few minutes. People are going to tell you, oh no, there's a leopard that crossed the road 5 meters away. And, by the time you get to that point and look into the bush, there's basically nothing there, or the bush is too long. So
Yeah.
don't go chasing the shots. I mean, spend your time driving. We have been in the park 2.5, I think, 2.5 days
Close
now.
on 3 days.
Close,
Yeah.
close to 3 days. Coming to 3 days now. We've seen the big five. We haven't got particularly good shots of lions, but that hasn't stopped us, from enjoying ourselves. We've thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, Prasheen has seen like 40 new birds. I've seen 10 or 12 myself as well, just by driving slowly and enjoying being out here and saying, oh, what's that? Oh, maybe this is something I haven't seen before. Maybe I should sit with this set of birds and get a behavior that I hadn't seen before.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, um, I think we are so blessed in South Africa to have the Kruger at our doorstep. It's just taking time for me to, or yourself, to enjoy what you have fun. Many people abroad are in winter now and might not be able to enjoy such parks that we have in South Africa. So it's all, at the end of the day, I think it's all about having fun. I think it's about the camaraderie with other people, with Pranesh, with myself, and there are many shots that we missed. But I think it's the memories that count at the end of the day. The shot might fade away, but I mean, in 20 years' time, myself and Pranesh will be like, remember the time we saw the
Saw
leopard
the
walking
leopards.
down the road,
Yeah.
and we might have not ever got the shot, but that memory sticks with you. So I think definitely have fun. The shot will always find you if it's meant to be. I think none more so than a woodlands kingfisher for me. I think we've at least heard about over 1,000 calls, and we have
That
not
just
seen one
eluded
that's
you.
perched or one that's like flown towards us.
Or anywhere within like 10 meters
10
of
meters
us.
of us. So
Even sitting here in the camp, I mean,
yeah.
we've heard them probably, in one of the trees close to us, but they've just eluded us. Well, Prasheen mostly.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
So I mean, at the end of the day, that's not going to take away from the trip we've made now. I think it's more the memories. Yes, we have gotten some shots. Some shots we've missed, but I think definitely the memories will not fade.
Okay, cool. And guys, thanks again for watching to this point, and we'll bring you some new content very soon.